He didn't curse. He didn't scream. He just sat there, holding the paper that said his story was too emotional. 17. Black. Brilliant. And invisible in a classroom that only wanted safe answers. But when he wrote the truth, the raw, bleeding, gut-punched truth, they tried to erase it. One teacher's rejection was supposed to silence him. Instead, it ignited a storm. Within days, his essay went viral. Within weeks, Google came knocking. And by the time the world listened, he wasn't just a student anymore. He was a movement. This is the story of how a silenced voice became unstoppable. They said the essay was too emotional, too raw, too personal. But what else was a 17-year-old supposed to write about when he was just trying to explain why his older brother never came back from a traffic stop? His name was Jordan Myers, quiet, observant. The kind of black teen teachers often forgot was in the room until his name showed up at the top of every test. Until he raised his hand with an answer no one else saw coming. Until he walked into school wearing his brother's oversized hoodie and someone whispered, "He won't last like the other one." Jordan had lived in silence long enough. So when Mr. Danner assigned the senior class their final project, an open-topic personal essay meant to show the heart behind the student, Jordan knew exactly what he'd write. He didn't hesitate, didn't second-guess. For the first time in months, his fingers moved across the keyboard faster than his thoughts. He titled it, "The Night the Sirens Didn't Stop." The essay was brutally honest. He wrote about the last phone call his family got, his mother's knees giving out, the way his little sister stared at the front door for days, waiting for a brother she didn't understand was never coming back. He wrote about the neighborhood, about how the playground turned quiet after that night, how even the gang kids started whispering "watch your back" like a prayer. But most of all, Jordan wrote about grief, the kind that burrows inside your chest and makes you forget how to laugh. When he turned it in, he felt lighter. Numb, but lighter. And then came the red-inked comment that changed everything. Too emotional, unfocused, not appropriate for academic submission. Signed, Mr. Danner. Typed below was a new directive: resubmit by Friday, with a more suitable topic. Avoid personal tragedy or political commentary. Jordan sat at his desk, the paper trembling in his hands. His story, his truth, was being dismissed like it was a diary entry. Not real, not worthy, not academic enough. He didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just walked home, shoved the paper in his backpack, and didn't say a word to his mom, who was too busy worrying about rent to notice his silence. But his best friend Caleb noticed. Caleb, who sat 2 seats behind Jordan in every English class since 9th grade, who'd read the draft the night Jordan wrote it and called him crying. "Bro, you turned that in." "That's the most real thing I've ever read," Caleb had said. "That ain't just a story, that's your life." Jordan shrugged. Didn't matter. But Caleb wasn't done. That night, while Jordan was slumped on the couch in front of the TV, Caleb snapped a picture of the first page of the essay. He cropped out Jordan's name and the teacher's comments, uploaded it to Twitter, and wrote, "My boy poured his soul into this." Teacher said it was too emotional and told him to write something else. If this is too much, maybe y'all need to ask why he had to live it in the first place. He didn't expect much. Maybe a few retweets from mutuals, some sympathy replies. He didn't expect it to blow up overnight. Jordan woke up to 52 missed texts and a phone buzzing like it was on fire. He rubbed his eyes, scrolled through the messages. "Bro, check Twitter, you're viral." He clicked the link Caleb sent. 5,000 retweets, 30,000 likes, and counting. People were crying in the replies, some were furious, others said they'd lived through the same thing. A woman from Oakland wrote, "I teach high school English. This is the kind of essay I pray my students have the courage to write." Another from New York, "I lost my brother too. Thank you for saying what I never could." Jordan didn't know what to feel. Part of him wanted to crawl under his bed and hide. Another part, buried deep beneath the grief and humiliation, felt seen. By strangers, not by his teacher, not by the people who watched him walk the halls like a shadow, but by the world. And then came the email that flipped the narrative entirely. The subject line read, "Google Education, Request for Contact." Jordan blinked, rereading the words like they couldn't possibly be real. The body of the email was short. Too short. "We came across a piece of writing circulating online believed to be yours. We would like to discuss an opportunity to feature it in an upcoming initiative on student voice and digital storytelling." Attached was a signature from someone high up. Caleb was screaming over the phone. "Jordan Bro. Google like Google. Google." Jordan sat frozen. His essay, the one Mr. Danner dismissed as too emotional, had just made it into Google's inbox. He hadn't even left the living room. Jordan didn't move for a long time. His phone sat in his lap, glowing faintly with notifications, but his eyes were stuck on that email. It didn't feel real, not just because it was Google, but because someone out there, someone powerful, someone respected, thought his words mattered. It was the first time in his life that authority didn't silence him. It validated something deeper than his writing. It validated him. Still, his gut twisted with something else. What if it was a mistake? What if they sent it to the wrong person? What if they didn't realize it was written by a teenager from the south side of Atlanta who'd never even been on a plane, let alone attended a storytelling summit? "Don't freeze now, man," Caleb said over speakerphone. "This is your shot." "My shot at what?" Jordan murmured. Caleb laughed, at finally being heard. Later that evening, Jordan responded to the email. He kept it formal, thanked them for reaching out. Confirmed the piece was his, included a fresh PDF with his name on it this time. Then he hit send, and just like that, everything changed. Within 48 hours, a representative from Google's education team was on a video call with Jordan and his mom. Her name was Ms. Rowe, bright smile, calm voice, and the kind of presence that made people feel like they mattered the second she said their name. "We want to spotlight Jordan's essay as part of our new initiative," she said, a campaign focused on amplifying youth voices that are often ignored. "His piece, it doesn't just speak, it shakes you." Jordan's mom, who had barely said a word through the call, wiped her eyes with the corner of her t-shirt. He stayed up all night writing that she whispered. Ms. Rowe smiled, and the world needed to read it. They offered to feature the piece on their national blog and social platforms. But they didn't stop there. They invited Jordan to speak on a virtual panel alongside other young writers who'd turned pain into power. All expenses paid, a personal writing coach, and a stipend. It was more than he had imagined, but the real storm hadn't even started yet. Because someone had forwarded the viral tweet and the now confirmed Google opportunity to the school board. And Mr. Danner saw it. That same afternoon, Jordan was called into the principal's office. He wasn't nervous. Not this time. He walked in calmly, clutching his backpack like armor. Mr. Danner was already seated, arms crossed, trying to wear a neutral face, but his eyes flickered with something sharp. Embarrassment, maybe. Resentment. Fear. Principal Andrews was speaking gently. "Jordan, your work has received some significant attention. We're proud of you, but we also want to make sure everything moving forward reflects positively on the school." Jordan tilted his head. "You mean the essay?" "Yes," Principal Andrews said. "It's touched a lot of people. I've read it myself. It's powerful. But we do need to address how it was handled initially." That's when Mr. Danner spoke. His tone was cool, flat. "I never said the essay lacked merit. I said it needed to be adjusted for an academic setting." Jordan didn't flinch. "You told me to take out the most human part of my story." That's the part the world cared about. Silence. The principal cleared his throat. Regardless, we'd like to formally acknowledge your achievement during next week's senior assembly. And we're open to you reading an excerpt if you'd like. Jordan's hands clenched around his backpack strap. He thought of all the times he'd sat in that school auditorium watching others get praised for science fairs and robotics tournaments while his own excellence stayed in the shadows. Now they wanted him on stage, because the world saw what they didn't. He nodded slowly. I'll read it, but I won't censor it. Principal Andrews nodded, of course. Mr. Danner said nothing. As Jordan turned to leave, he heard him mutter under his breath. One essay, one tweet. Now he thinks he's Baldwin. Jordan paused in the doorway. He didn't respond. He didn't have to. Because the world already had. The news spread through the school like spilled ink, fast, messy, and impossible to contain. By Tuesday morning, Jordan couldn't walk the hallways without someone turning to whisper. Some students clapped him on the back. A few teachers gave tight approving nods. But there were others, the ones who'd never even looked at him twice before, now staring like he was a walking headline instead of a person. He didn't care much for the attention. Not because he didn't want to be seen, but because it wasn't him they saw. It was the event, the drama, the black kid goes viral story that made the school look progressive for giving him a mic. He could feel it in the way Mr. Danner began correcting his posture during class presentations. Try not to sound defensive, Jordan, he'd say, arms folded. Just explain your argument clearly. He could feel it in the way the front office printed flyers about celebrating diverse voices the same week they tried to remove a mural about police brutality from the student commons. It was surface-level praise covering deep cracks. Still, Jordan stayed focused. The night before the assembly, he rewrote the ending of his essay. He wanted it to hit harder. He wanted them to feel what he felt when the blue lights never stopped flashing. Meanwhile, Caleb was doing what he did best, talking way too much. This is your moment, bro. You gotta walk on stage like Kendrick at the Grammys. Straight legend energy. Jordan smiled. It's not about flexing. Caleb grinned. It is if it shuts Danner up for good. Jordan looked down at the pages in his hand. He didn't want revenge. He wanted understanding. That's all he ever wanted. The morning of the assembly arrived. The gymnasium was packed, students, teachers, even parents who didn't usually show up to school events. The bleachers buzzed with energy phones out, cameras rolling. Principal Andrews stepped up to the mic, clearing his throat. Today, we have the honor of hearing from one of our own, a young man whose courage to speak his truth reminded us all what education is supposed to be about: voice honesty and the power of story. Please welcome Jordan Myers. Applause erupted. Jordan stepped forward, heart pounding, not from fear, but from something more dangerous. Conviction. He took a breath and raised the mic. I was told this essay was too emotional, too raw, not suitable for academic work. The gym fell silent. He glanced at the first row where Mr. Danner sat rigid, jaw tight. Jordan continued, his voice calm but steady. But when your brother dies during a traffic stop, you don't get to choose how you process that. You don't get to decide if your grief is appropriate. You just feel it, and sometimes you write it down. He read every word, unedited, unfiltered. He talked about the fear of answering the door at night, the sound of sirens echoing down familiar streets, the empty chair at Thanksgiving. And when he finished, he looked up not at the audience but at the back wall, at the double doors where his brother used to walk in late, grinning like he owned the place. A pause, then someone stood. It was a teacher, Mrs. Patel from Social Studies. She clapped, once, then again. The sound multiplied, row after row rising to their feet. Students who never spoke clapping with red eyes. Teachers wiping their cheeks. Even Principal Andrews looked shaken. Only one man remained seated, Mr. Danner, arms crossed, stone-faced, but even he couldn't stop what was already happening. Because by the end of the day, clips of Jordan's speech were all over TikTok, Instagram, and education blogs. People weren't just listening, they were rallying. "You're braver than I ever was," at 17, one comment read. Another, "This is what students should be encouraged to do. This is how we change the world." And then came the twist no one saw coming. That evening, Jordan got another email. This time not from Google. This time from a journalist. Subject line, The New Yorker. Feature interest. The name alone made his chest tighten. It wasn't some random blog or school newspaper. This was one of the most prestigious literary magazines in the country. A place where writers he'd only heard about in class got published, where people talked in hushed voices about Pulitzer winners and cultural essays that shaped national conversations. Now they wanted to talk to him. His hands shook as he opened the email. It was from a writer named Ava Lynn. She said she'd seen a clip of his school speech on Twitter. Said it made her cry. Said she hadn't stopped thinking about his last line, the one about sirens and silence. Then she said this, "I think the world needs to hear your story in full. Not just a clip, not just a tweet. A piece with your name, your voice, your truth. I'd be honored to help you tell it. No edits you don't approve, no watering it down." Jordan's throat went dry. He clicked over to her profile. Ava Lynn wasn't some rookie. She'd written essays on racial injustice, police brutality, education, inequality. Her work had been taught in college seminars. And now she wanted to write about him. He replied with one word. Yes. The next afternoon they spoke over Zoom. Her face was kind. She didn't rush him. Didn't ask him to perform his grief like others did. She let him talk about his brother, about school, about Mr. Danner and the red ink that had started it all. And for the first time, Jordan heard his own story outside his own body. Heard it through Ava's questions, through her thoughtful silence, through the way she nodded and wiped at her eyes without making it about her. When they finished, she said something he wouldn't forget. "People think pain disqualifies you. But what you did, that essay, that speech, it qualified you to speak. You didn't wait for permission. That's power." Jordan didn't respond. He couldn't. His throat was too full. Later that week, Caleb came bursting into his house without knocking, holding his phone up like it was the Holy Grail. "Bro, you're in print, like New Yorker print." The article was titled, "Too Emotional to Be Academic." One teen's essay that forced a conversation, and beneath it a photo of Jordan, sitting at his desk, looking straight into the lens. Ava had written it beautifully. She quoted lines from the essay, described the school assembly, but more than that, she wrote about the contradiction of being asked to show your voice while being punished the moment you do. Jordan read the entire piece in silence. Then he closed the screen and walked out to the porch where his mom was folding laundry. He handed her the phone. She read it slowly, quietly, and then she looked up, eyes wet. "I always told your brother you had a voice like your granddad. That kind that makes people stop what they're doing." Jordan smiled. For once, it didn't feel like the world was crashing in. It felt like it was listening. But just as things were beginning to settle into something like hope, the other shoe dropped. A local news station reached out. Said they wanted to do a segment on the viral essay that changed a school. Jordan hesitated. His mom urged him to say yes. Caleb practically begged him, but Jordan wasn't sure. Not because he was scared, not anymore, but because he knew what would come next. Critics, doubt, the whispers behind closed doors that said he didn't deserve this. He was right, because the morning after the segment aired, he found a printed letter stuffed inside his locker, folded neatly. No name. Typed. Enjoy your 15 minutes. You didn't earn it. You just played the race card loud enough. Jordan stood there staring at the words. He read them twice, then again. He didn't tear it up. He didn't cry. He simply folded it back, slid it into his pocket, and walked to class. Because now they weren't just attacking his words. They were trying to erase his worth. But Jordan had learned something in the fire. They could mock him, dismiss him, try to silence him, but they couldn't make him small. Not anymore. The letter stayed in Jordan's pocket all day. He didn't show it to anyone. Not to Caleb, who would have flipped the whole school upside down, trying to find out who sent it. Not to his mom, who was already worried enough that the world was putting his name on billboards, but not protecting him from what came with it. Jordan kept it like a secret. Because it wasn't just hate, it was proof. Proof that no matter how far he climbed, there were people watching from the shadows hoping he'd slip. But if they thought a piece of paper would scare him into silence, they hadn't read his essay. At lunch, he sat at the end of the table, eyes low, earbuds in, but not playing music. He was thinking, planning, rewriting his next move. And that night he posted something unexpected. Not another clip, not a humble brag, just a photo of the anonymous letter. With one line beneath it, "This isn't the first time someone tried to shut me up. Won't be the last. But I write louder now." It went viral, again, not because of rage, but because of resilience. In the comments, dozens of black students from around the country started sharing their own too emotional moments. Essays torn apart, speeches rejected, projects dismissed because they weren't neutral enough. Jordan had struck something raw, something real. He didn't just go viral, he ignited a movement. Someone started a hashtag #WriteLouder. By the next day, it was trending. High schoolers posted screenshots of essays they'd once buried in Google Docs because they thought no one would care. College students posted rejection notes that called their trauma too heavy. Teachers, real ones, shared how they used Jordan's story in class to remind their students that truth has a place in academia. Even celebrities jumped in. A well-known black author tweeted, "I was told my memoir would alienate white readers. Good thing I didn't listen." Jordan Myers, your pen is your power. Keep writing, loud. Jordan barely knew how to respond anymore. It wasn't just about the essay now. It was about everybody who'd ever been told their truth was too uncomfortable to be allowed. Meanwhile, back at school, the energy had shifted. Some students who never looked him in the eye before now sat beside him in class. One girl left a post-it on his locker. "My dad died too. I never told anyone. Thank you." But not everyone was clapping. Mr. Danner was quieter than ever, not out of guilt, but because control had slipped from his fingers and he knew it. One afternoon, Jordan walked past his classroom and overheard him snapping at another student for citing an opinionated source in their essay. Nothing had changed. Not in him. But Jordan wasn't surprised. He'd learned something most students never do. When your story shakes the room, some people will cover their ears before they admit they should have been listening all along. That weekend, something else happened. Jordan received an invitation. A real one. Printed. Sealed. From the State Department of Education. They were hosting a student-led summit on inclusive curriculum and educational equity. They wanted him to speak. Not just about the essay, but about what came after. About the system that tried to reduce his pain to a footnote, and how he fought to make it a headline. Jordan sat on his bed staring at the envelope. He remembered the first night he wrote his story, how scared he was, how heavy it felt, and now they were asking him to teach the system that tried to silence him. He said yes, but not before making one promise to himself: he wouldn't just speak for himself anymore. He'd carry every silenced voice with him. He'd make the room feel what it tried to avoid. and he'd say the words the red ink tried to erase, because the world was listening now, and Jordan had no plans to whisper. The summit was held in a towering, glass building downtown, the kind of place that looked like it filtered out people like Jordan before they even reached the front steps. But this time his name was on the welcome banner: Equity in Education Voices That Matter. And there, under the gold letters, was a panel photo. 4 students, 3 adults. One name in bold, Jordan Myers, student speaker. The essay they tried to silence Caleb came with him. Of course he did. He wore a t-shirt that said, "Hat Write Louder," in thick black letters, and kept whispering, "Bro, they don't even know what's coming." Jordan chuckled, but inside the pressure was mounting. This wasn't just a classroom, or a tweet, or a speech at a school assembly. This was policymakers, superintendents, district leaders who controlled what got taught and who got heard. When they called his name, Jordan stepped up to the podium, heart steady. He scanned the room. And then he spoke. "When I first wrote that essay," he began, "I wasn't trying to start a movement. I was trying to survive one." A hush fell. He didn't use notes, didn't read from a script. He told them about the night he wrote his story, about the red pen, about the teacher who said his grief was too emotional for class. He talked about the girl who left the post-it on his locker, the students who found courage in their own stories because someone else went first. Then he asked a question. Why is it that we ask students to tell the truth in writing, but punish them when their truth doesn't make us comfortable? The room was still. No one moved. And then a voice spoke from the second row. A woman, older glasses low on her nose, one hand covering her mouth, whispered, "Because we're afraid." Jordan looked at her and nodded. Exactly. He didn't shout, he didn't preach, he just laid it out sentence by sentence like bricks in a path no one could walk around. We keep teaching our students to edit themselves for approval, to trim their pain, filter their voice, keep it clean, keep it quiet. But some stories are meant to bleed. And if we can't make room for that in school, then what are we really teaching? When he finished, there was no applause at first. Only silence. The good kind. The heavy kind. Then one clap, then 2, then the room stood. It was no longer about one essay. It was about a mirror being held up, and the reflection wasn't pretty. After the event, Jordan was swarmed. Reporters, principals, even a college recruiter from Howard University asked to speak with him. But one moment stood out. A black male teacher walked up to him. Tall, wide-framed eyes, glassy, and said, "I've been teaching for 18 years, and I've never heard a student say what I've wanted to scream." He handed Jordan a card. "Let me know if you ever want to teach." Jordan blinked. "Teach. You already are," the man said. That night, back in his room, Jordan sat at his desk, the same one he wrote his first essay at. He looked at the Google email, the New Yorker article, the viral tweets, the summit badge around his neck. He reached into his drawer and pulled out the original essay, the one with red ink bleeding across the top. He read it again. It still hurt, but this time it didn't feel like a wound. It felt like armor. Then he did something he hadn't planned on. He started a new document, titled it, "The Class That Failed the Test." And in the first line he wrote, "Sometimes the lesson isn't for the student, it's for the system pretending it's already listening." Monday came like any other school day, except it wasn't. By now, Jordan's life had become a quiet earthquake. Everything around him still looked the same. The chipped lockers, the muffled morning announcements, the smell of pencil shavings and cafeteria grease. But the air had shifted, and so had he. When he walked into English class, Mr. Danner didn't look up. Not when Jordan sat down. Not when other students leaned in whispering congratulations or tossing him thumbs up. Not even when someone said they're making us read his New Yorker article in debate next week. Instead, Mr. Danner cleared his throat and passed out a new rubric, Quarter 3 Essay Guidelines. At the top, in bold, it read, "Students are encouraged to explore authentic personal experiences, even those that engage emotionally difficult or socially relevant themes." Jordan blinked. That sentence hadn't been there before. It wasn't just a small change. It was an admission. A silent one, maybe, but real. Still, Mr. Danner never looked Jordan's way, never said a word, and that silence, it said everything. But Jordan didn't come to class for approval anymore. He came to change the room. That afternoon, Principal Andrews pulled Jordan aside. "Walk with me," he said. They moved down the hallway in step. "We've been discussing ways to better support student expression," the principal began, voice even. "And based on recent events, we're piloting a new initiative." Jordan waited. "We'd like you to help lead it." Jordan turned surprised. "Me? You've already done more to move this school forward than half our admin staff. You've got the students listening. We need that." The program would be called Page to Power, a platform for students to submit essays, poems, and spoken word pieces, unedited, unfiltered, raw. It would be published digitally and performed live monthly. Jordan would be the first editor-in-chief. It felt surreal. He had gone from being silenced to giving others the mic. He agreed, of course, not for the spotlight, but because he remembered the versions of himself that still sat in classrooms everywhere, scribbling truth into the margins of worksheets thinking no one would ever read them, and he wouldn't let them go unheard. Later that evening, Jordan stood in front of his bedroom mirror. He was rehearsing, not for a summit, not for a panel, but for a video he was about to post. A message to his younger self. To the kid who stayed quiet so long it started to feel like a personality trait. He pressed record. "Hey," he said softly, looking into the lens to the student who thinks your story's too painful to be read. "Read it anyway. Loud. Don't water it down to make others comfortable. Don't shrink it to fit the rubric. If they tell you it's too emotional, good. That means it's alive." He paused. "They tried to bury my voice. They didn't realize it was a seed." He clicked upload. The video spread like fire. Teachers showed it in classrooms. Libraries pinned it on walls. And late that night, Jordan received another DM. It was from a girl in Detroit. She'd been expelled for a poem she wrote after losing her cousin in a police raid. She'd seen his summit video. She'd read his essay. And now she was writing again. "Your story gave me mine back," she said. Jordan read it 3 times, then closed his eyes. This was why he didn't quit when the red ink bled across his page. This was why he didn't fold when the letter in his locker told him to fade. Because voices, real ones, don't go silent. They echo, and he was just getting started. The first Page to Power reading took place on a Friday afternoon in the school auditorium. It wasn't fancy. No stage lights, no professional mics. Just folding chairs, a podium borrowed from the front office, and a crowd of maybe 50 people. But it felt sacred. Jordan stood backstage peeking through the curtain, heart beating slower than usual, not from fear, but focus. 1 year ago, he would have done anything to avoid a spotlight like this. Now he was building it. Caleb stood nearby holding a clipboard like he was managing Beyoncé's world tour. "Okay," he whispered. "We've got 3 poems, 2 essays, and 1 short story. You ready to light this thing up?" Jordan smiled. They'd opened submissions 2 weeks ago. By the first weekend, they had over 70, and none of them were safe. They were about deportation addiction, racism, gender identity, losing a parent, losing a friend. Things students whispered about in hallways but never dared speak into a mic. Until now, the crowd filed in parents, teachers, even Mr. Danner. Jordan caught him slipping in near the back, arms crossed, eyes cautious, but he said nothing. Did nothing. just listened. The first speaker was a freshman named Tyra. Small, soft-spoken hair in thick braids. She read a poem about the day her older brother left for juvie and never came home again. By the end, no one moved. Then came Hosea Jr., who'd written about his mother being detained during a routine check on their street. A girl in the front row started crying halfway through. And then Jordan stepped forward. Not to read, but to speak. Some of us were told our pain doesn't belong in school, he said, eyes sweeping the crowd. That it's too heavy, too political, too real. He paused. But I think the real problem is that for too long, school has only made room for stories that don't make people uncomfortable. He looked toward the back where Mr. Danner sat, still as stone. And if the only stories we're allowed to tell are the ones that don't shake the room, then maybe we've been building the wrong kind of room. Applause. Long, deep, not performative grateful. Afterward, as students hugged, cried, and passed each other folded notes with poems scrawled on them, Jordan felt something shift inside him. He wasn't just reacting anymore, he was building. Not just a moment, but a movement. And that night something wild happened. Trevor Noah reposted Jordan's summit clip with the caption, "This kid turned rejection into revolution. Future president energy." Jordan nearly dropped his phone. Caleb did drop his taco. The post had over 1 million views by morning. More DMs followed. A nonprofit from Chicago wanted him to keynote a youth conference. An education startup offered to partner with Page to Power and bring it to other schools. Even Google circled back, inviting him to record a video segment for their global classroom initiative. Jordan was everywhere. But he didn't let the noise change him. He still walked the same cracked sidewalks to school. Still wore his brother's hoodie when the mornings were cold. Still texted his mom before every event with "about to speak. Wish me luck." Because fame wasn't the goal. Voice was. Truth. Healing. And every day he carried that with him like a torch. Until one afternoon, 3 weeks after the reading, he was called back to the principal's office. Again. He assumed it was about a news interview, maybe another request. But when he walked in, Mr. Danner was already there. Alone. Sitting in the same chair where he'd once dismissed Jordan's truth like it was a classroom inconvenience. He looked up slowly. "I read the essay," he said. Jordan said nothing. Danner cleared his throat. "The whole thing. Not just the first draft. The final version. The one you read at the assembly." Still, Jordan said nothing. Because he'd learned sometimes silence says more than any speech. "I owe you an apology," Danner said, his voice low, words reluctant. "I thought I was protecting academic standards, but I was just protecting myself." Jordan raised an eyebrow. From what Danner looked away, from feeling it. He stood, and for the first time since this entire thing began, he extended his hand. Jordan didn't rush to shake it. He didn't need to. Because whether Danner meant it or not, Jordan had already won. Not because of the apology, but because he wrote through the silence, and the world had heard him anyway. Spring came quietly, like it always does. The cherry blossoms outside the school parking lot bloomed just the same. The final bell still rang at 3:45. Seniors counted down the days to graduation and scribbled Sharpie on their binders. But for Jordan Myers, everything had changed. He wasn't just a student anymore. He was a name people knew. A voice they quoted. A presence people leaned on when they didn't know how to say what hurt. And it was heavier than anyone realized. Some days he loved it. The messages from students in other states, the invitations to speak, the emails that started with, "Your words saved me." But other days he just wanted to be a kid again. Wanted to sit at lunch without someone sliding him a poem and asking, "Is this good enough?" Wanted to walk the hall without being the symbol for everything the school had failed to do right. He never complained. but the wait added up. That's when Ms. Rowe called, the Google rep. She asked if he had time for a short call, said there was something she wanted to offer. Jordan hesitated. The last time she'd reached out, his entire world had flipped upside down. But he said yes. And 30 minutes later, he was staring at a screen as she smiled back at him, that same calm voice, that same steady presence. "We're launching a fellowship," she said. "A summer writing residency for youth changemakers. Small group, paid mentorship. And your name came up more than once." Jordan blinked. "You want me to be a fellow?" She shook her head gently. "No, we want you to lead one." His throat caught. "You want me to teach?" She grinned. "You've already been doing it." And just like that, Jordan was no longer just the kid who'd written a band essay. He was someone creating space for others to write theirs. The program would run for 8 weeks, 10 students, 1 digital classroom, 3 published anthologies. Jordan would be paired with an editor, a writing coach, and a mentor, someone he could lean on too. Because even the loudest voices need a place to rest. That night, Jordan sat at his desk again. Same desk, same old laptop, but now it felt different. The scars weren't just reminders of pain anymore. They were the foundation for something bigger. He opened a fresh document. Title, Letters to the Silenced. And he began writing, not for publication, not for a summit, but for the kids who hadn't spoken yet. He wrote letters. To the girl in Mississippi who was told her poems were too dark. To the boy in Ohio who was kicked out of class for writing about poverty. To the student who sent Jordan a message from a juvenile facility and signed it, "I write in here because out there no one listens." He wrote to them all. And when he finished, he saved the file, attached it to an email, and sent it straight to Google's education team. With one note, "I want these letters to be the first thing new students read when they log into the program. Let them know they're not alone before they even start." The reply came minutes later. Approved. In the days that followed, Jordan prepared to leave for the residency. Not just physically, but mentally. He cleaned his room, packed his journals, printed out a hard copy of his original essay. Not the published version, not the one that went viral. The first one, with the red pen. The one that started it all. He folded it carefully and placed it at the bottom of his bag. Not because he needed to remember the pain, but because he needed to remember the proof that sometimes what gets rejected first is exactly what the world needs most. And he was ready now to help others discover that for themselves. The writing residency took place in a quiet college town nestled between hills and silence. There were no bells ringing here, no cafeteria noise, no teachers hovering with red pens. Just space open, uninterrupted space, and students who had never not once been asked, "What story are you afraid to tell?" Jordan stood at the front of the workshop room on the first day, palms pressed to the podium, eyes scanning the 10 young faces before him. They were nervous, just like he had been. Some avoided eye contact. Some clutched notebooks like shields. He understood all of it. So he began simply. "I'm not here to teach you grammar," he said. "I'm here to help you say what you've never said out loud." A girl in the second row blinked fast, like she might cry already. And just like that, the air broke open. By week 2, walls were crumbling. One boy wrote about growing up in foster care and how he used to write poetry on bathroom stalls with a stolen Sharpie. A girl from Tulsa wrote about hiding her mother's immigration papers under her bed for years, terrified they'd disappear. Another student handed Jordan a sealed envelope with nothing on it but the words, "Please don't read this unless I stop showing up." He read it anyway. It was a letter to her father who had died by suicide. Jordan didn't say anything, just hugged her, tighter than a teacher would, like someone who knew what it meant to lose too much too young. And by week 4, something even bigger happened. The program had gone national. Clips of students reading their pieces were being reposted by influencers. A small publishing house offered to print the first-ever page-to-power anthology with full royalties going to youth writing programs. Jordan's name was on the back cover. But he didn't care about that. What mattered was what the girl from Tulsa said during the final circle. She stood holding her journal hands trembling. My whole life I thought my story was something to survive, not something to share. And that was everything. When the program ended, Jordan returned home changed not by the fame, but by the fire he saw catch in others. He walked into his school a week later just to visit. Students stared. One freshman ran up and asked for a selfie. A teacher offered him a guest speaking slot in the fall. But the moment that caught him off guard was Mr. Danner, waiting by the front office, holding something. He approached quietly. No smugness, no pride, just a folder. I revised the curriculum, he said. Wanted you to see it. Jordan opened it. Inside was a new senior writing unit. Unit title When Truth Hurts Writing Without Apology. He turned the page. The first reading assignment. His essay. Untouched. Unedited. Below it, a reflection prompt asking students how truth can be both personal and revolutionary. Jordan looked up. Mr. Danner spoke first. I was wrong. Jordan didn't nod, didn't forgive, didn't need to. He just said, "Thank you," and walked away. Some silences don't need to be filled. That night, Jordan sat by the window in his room, watching cars drift past like slow-moving stars. The sky was wide, endless, and so was the future. He pulled out a new notebook. On the first page he wrote, "They said my words were too emotional, but I didn't write them for approval. I wrote them because silence was killing me." He stared at the sentence, then underlined it twice, and for the first time in his life he didn't feel like a student waiting to be heard. He felt like an author, a builder, a spark that wouldn't go out, no matter who tried to erase him. They said it was too emotional. They marked his pain with red ink, called his truth inappropriate, told him to revise who he was, but instead of rewriting his story, he rewrote theirs. He built a platform, amplified other voices, turned rejection into revolution, and the essay they tried to bury it became required reading. So to every student who's ever been told to stay quiet, write louder. To every young person who's been told their truth is too much, speak anyway, because silence protects systems. But your voice can change them. And if you've ever been told your story doesn't belong, you belong more than ever. Just ask the boy who was almost erased and became the author of everything they feared.